back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time we're gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Knick School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. I am, of course, your host, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you here on this Monday, the 15th day of June. Hope you're all doing well out there. Hope you're all off to a great start in your day and in your week, whatever it is you may be doing right now. Thank you for taking the time to check out my podcast this week, whether you're watching the live feed via YouTube or through one of my other social media accounts, or if you couldn't stand staring at me and preferred listening to the podcast version later in the day, that's okay. I always appreciate any and all of the support that I can get for this podcast, which, as you know, you can find through our YouTube channel, as well as there's a Linktree page that I believe is in the comment section of the YouTube channel, where you can find the link for all of the places you can find the podcast, whether it be Podbean.com or your traditional podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Podcasts. We're on Amazon Music, all of the podcast platforms that you can think of, you can find Keeping It Sports with M3. And as always, you can find me on social media on Instagram at Keeping It Sports with M3. My personal page as well has a link to the podcasts at Mike M3 Rosansky, as well as on Twitter, you can find me at Keeping It Sports. So once again, thank you for all the support, and thank you, and please share for others. But today is a very celebratory day, not for yours truly, because I'm not a fan of this team. I'm not a hater of this team, but I have to be respectful. I have to give credit where credit is due. I, like many fans out there, did not think this day was ever going to happen. It felt like this day was, for many out there, only a dream. But no, it's reality. You could say it to yourselves, Knick fans. You could scream it from the mountaintops. You could scream it from skyscrapers. Scream it out your car window. The New York Knicks are NBA champions. For the first time in 53 years. Think about how much the world has changed in that time. That's well before, at least 30 years before social media ever existed. And back then, the NFL season was only a 14-game season. At that time, you just had the Dolphins completing a 17-0 championship run, still the only undefeated champions in NFL history. The Godfather had just come out and was winning multiple Oscar awards. We were in the midst of Secretarian being a Triple Crown winner. It was only weeks after the first mobile phone call was made, so that there was so many things that seem foreign in today's society, or seem like they were a million years ago, that were taking place at that time. And 53 years, that is a long damn time. If you're a fan, you're sitting there wondering whether you're someone that saw that group led by Walt Clyde Frazier and Willis Reed win their second championship in a 5-year span back in 1973. If you're one of those fans that was fortunate enough to see that, or you're someone who's under the age of, let's say, 45 years old, and all you've had in that time is either brief teases, pain, or embarrassment when it comes to the Knick franchise. The idea of the Knicks being champions is something that you're thinking could only happen in a movie. It could only be dreamed about. And you dealt with a lot, and I mean a lot of pain in that time frame. Whether you want to go back to the Charles Smith Memorial game in the 93 conference finals against the Bulls, or how about John Stark's bad game in Game 7 of the 94 NBA Finals against Olajuwon and the Rockets, and Olajuwon blocking him a couple times in that game. To then you follow that up the next year, you're in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and it's bookended by two of the most painful losses in Madison Square Garden history. Whether you want to talk Game 1, Reggie scoring 8 points in the final 9 seconds when it looked like the Knicks had sealed the deal and were going to go up 1-0, and pulls off a miracle that has never been seen before. Or then Game 7 and Patrick Ewing missing the shot at the buzzer, the finger roll that rolls off the rim. When those kind of moments happen, you start to wonder, is it ever going to be our time? You follow that up with 1997, the nonsense that happened in that series against the Miami Heat, where you have the altercation between P.J. Brown and Charlie Ward, and the Knicks get the raw end of the deal here with 5 of the 6 suspensions from that incident because Ewing and company took one step off the team's bench during the melee. They weren't instigators. They weren't making the situation worse. But because they stepped off the bench, still one of the dumber rules that you're going to find in not just the NBA, but all of sports, they get taxed that, and it allowed Miami to come back and win that series. And you close out that decade with losing the NBA Finals in 5 games to the Spurs, who, even if you had a healthy Patrick Ewing, you probably weren't beating that team anyway, because you had David Robinson on the other side. You had a young Tim Duncan who was just coming into his own, and you were starting to see the beginning of what was going to be a very, very impressive stretch by the San Antonio Spurs. That ended a decade of pain in the 90s that turned into a era of just embarrassment, because the 90s, you had all of those painful losses mixed in with Pat Riley walking out on you guys and going to the Miami Heat. And then the new millennium starts, Van Gundy leaves, and it's nothing but a total shit show from there. You go from the Isaiah Thomas era, which had one playoff appearance and a whole bunch of awful trades in the mix there, mostly Stephon Marbury, but you also got to include Steve Francis and Zach Randolph in the mix. The awful Eddie Curry contract, and then mix in the off-the-court embarrassment that Isaiah Thomas was creating that led to lawsuits against him and Madison Square Garden. You thought things were going to start to turn around briefly when Donnie Walsh came in, and he looked like he was putting pieces in place for the Knicks to be pretty good, even though you really didn't get any of the stars that you thought you were going to get in that summer of 2010 when LeBron, Wade, Bosh, and all those big stars were available. You essentially settled for a second-place signing in Stephon Marbury, who was good for a year, but then the injuries started to take over. And then Donnie Walsh got fed up when you had James Dolan, who kept butting in and meddling, including forcing his hand with the Carmelo Anthony trade before he really wanted to do that. He would have preferred to wait and sign Melo as a free agent in that summer and keep all the pieces on that roster, but instead they kind of broke up the charm of that team and went for the jugular with Melo. And while it led to some good moments, they had a 54-win season in the mix there, got to the playoffs and had their heart broken by the Pacers, including Roy Hibbert blocking Melo at the rim in the closeout of that series. You really never had that sustained continuality, that sustained success with that team after that. And that led to the Phil Jackson era, which was highlighted by bad signings like Joakim Noah, constant changing at the head coach position, going from Mike Woodson to then Derek Fisher and Kurt Rambis, a whole bunch of guys that were just terrible at this job because they were having Phil Jackson's coaching philosophy forced upon them. Bad trades, bad draft picks outside of selecting Kristaps Porzingis at 4th overall, but even he eventually forced his way out. And then you forget that there were so many during this time of what if moments that you sit back and you think about, whether it comes to the fact that you get Patrick Ewing, but you never got over the hill with him. You never got that championship. And then you see the look on his face on Saturday night when the Knicks finally win the championship, and just tears of joy coming down his face because he unfortunately never got the job done. Didn't have the right team around him. But to see the Knicks finally do a team that he took so much pride in for so long, it meant a lot to him. You have what ifs such as selecting one pick after Steph Curry getting picked in 2009, or LeBron James embarrassing you guys by holding the Decision TV special 15 minutes away from your practice facility in July 2010 just to choose the Miami Heat. You have the draft lottery in 2019 where Zion Williamson and Ja Morant were coming out as the top 2 picks. You end up falling to 3rd in that draft lottery. And let's be fair, for a multitude of reasons, you probably lucked out, whether it be Zion Williamson's health or Ja Morant's immaturity and off-court nonsense. You probably lucked out not getting either of them. But then you got double whammied by the summer of 2019, where you had all of this cap space, enough for 2 max contracts, and the likes of KD, Kyrie, Kawhi, and others looked at you and said, no thanks, good. So it's been a really difficult, painful, embarrassing time for the New York Knicks. But all of that got wiped away. All of that got wiped away, not just by Saturday night, by knocking off the San Antonio Spurs in 5 games. No, it got knocked away by this remarkable run you went on over these last 2 months, whether it be knocking off the Atlanta Hawks in 6 games, or then in both the conference semis and conference finals, sweeping the Philadelphia 76ers and the Cleveland Cavaliers, respectively. There's moments from all of those series that you're going to look back on in Knicks lore, and they're going to be on the DVD when it comes out eventually, or whatever form of video montage comes out for this team. Think about it. On Friday, April 24th, there was a lot of misery that surrounded the New York Knicks and Knicks Nation. because they had just lost game 3 to the Atlanta Hawks, were trailing the series 2-1. People started calling for Mike Brown's job. People started the chatter again for potentially trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo. The futures of Cat and either Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby were in doubt. But you turn that all around. I don't know whether it was the willpower of this team or the fact that this fan base began overtaking the opposing team's buildings and turning Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Cleveland into essentially Madison Square Garden 2.0. But that's really what happened. And when you look back on this run, you're going to think about the annihilation of the Atlanta Hawks in Game 6, a beatdown like we've never seen before, where you're up by 60 points in the third quarter on them at one point, and the game was pretty much over at the start of the second quarter. Or you're going to be looking at how you flat out embarrass the Philadelphia 76ers and turning Wells Fargo Center, or whatever they call that place these days, Xfinity Arena, into MSG South, and their fans and players being so whiny. And add to the whininess, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who still to this day probably think analytically they're alive in that series. But you can't make any comments when you choke away a 22-point lead in the fourth quarter and James Harden's getting physically abused by Jalen Brunson in the overtime. And then to top San Antonio Spurs team, who I think has a bright future ahead of them, is going to be a team on the rise, going to be a championship contender year in, year out, as long as they remain healthy. And they got off to quick starts against you, but they didn't know how to finish. The Knicks knew how to finish. The Knicks knew how to get the job done. And what makes this all the world sweeter is not just that pain and embarrassment you went on, but when you think about the makeup of this team, this was not a team built up on first-round draft picks or top draft picks like we think about once upon a time that Oklahoma City team that had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, who were all lottery draft picks. No. This was a team that was really rebuilt and reshaped from the ground up. And when you think about it, it all started on March 2nd, 2020. That was the day that James Dolan finally took a step back, hired an outside-the-box candidate in Leon Rose as the president of basketball operations. Leon Rose, he was a player agent at the time. He was not involved in anybody's front office. He did not have coaching experience or roster building experience. So that was a big swing that James Dolan was taking. But clearly it worked out because he took a step back and he let Leon Rose build up this team. Not with going through some kind of a process, not through tanking like what we've seen a bunch of other teams do, most famously the Philadelphia 76ers. No. He built this team up with trades and smart free agent signings, including a free agent signing that's going to go down in not just Knicks lore, but New York City lore, and maybe in the lore of all of professional sports, as one of, if not the greatest free agent signing of all time. And that's bringing in Jalen Brunson. Because face it, Knick fans, not a lot of you knew who the hell this guy was 4 years ago. You knew he was a guy on the Dallas Mavericks, wasn't a starter until his final season there. And we thought he was a good NBA player, but no one saw him turning into this. No one saw him turning into a face of a franchise type player, a king of New York City type player, and a player that is now going to be forever beloved for his performance these last 4 years the gift that he gave this franchise, not just by winning a championship, not just by being finals MVP, but it takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of soul searching to be that guy that's willing to take such a massive pay cut on his most recent contract extension, where he took something like $113 million pay cut to allow this team to go out there and make other moves. Will it be giving extensions to his college teammates, Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, both who came over in trades, and both, especially in the case of Mikal Bridges, were controversial trades. We're trading for OG Anunoby and getting a contract extension for him when there were no guarantees after his first season that he'd remain here. Or to then the cherry on top, bringing Karl Anthony Towns. And together you watched over this last 2 years, this group gel together, mold together, even during some lull times, during some times where you had questions about this team, whether it be the first night they're together and they get blown off the court up in Boston against the Celtics, or the first series against the Atlanta Hawks going down 2-1, or last year losing in the conference finals to the Indiana Pacers and the heartbreak there with Halliburton's game-tying shot in Game 1 and then losing in Game 6. This team stuck together. This team gelled together. These players deserve a humongous amount of credit. Leon Rose deserves a whole bunch of credit. And then Mike Brown deserves a bunch of credit, surviving all the criticism, surviving a really difficult market here. And just, you cannot say enough about this team and about this run. It's a run that is very special. It's a run that, if you're a Knick fan, you're celebrating. It's a run that, hell, we're going to celebrate and talk about all podcasts long today. Because you think I'm just going to spend only the first 20 minutes of the podcast talking about what went on here? No. We got a lot to break down here. We got a lot to talk about on how we got here, a lot to talk about when it comes to the games in this series over the last week. Give you some thoughts on the Spurs end of things here. Try to fit it all in here over the next about 45 minutes or so here, because this is a day you all have waited for and you all deserve, Knick fans. So, like I tell you each and every single Monday at this time, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
You cannot say enough about the job Mike Brown did here. And you got to imagine there was a lot of pressure on this guy coming in as the Knicks head coach just over a year ago. You look at Game 1 was the 1-year anniversary of Tom Thibodeau's firing. That was a decision that was highly scrutinized, highly criticized at the time. And even yours truly did not think it was the right decision to fire Tom Thibodeau. Thought it was just kind of a lateral move going from Thibodeau to Mike Brown, considering Mike Brown had been fired 4 different previous times, including twice by the Cleveland Cavaliers. But when you look at this, there's kind of a Joe Torre comparison here. Tom Thibodeau was a well-thought-of head coach for the New York Knicks, as was back in the mid-90s, Buck Showalter was for the Yankees. They would both get fired after a run, not getting over that hurdle, not getting to the ultimate job, and be replaced by coaches that were thought of on the same level as them somewhat, and people kind of raise their eyebrows at that. Torrey would turn out to be the right straw to stir the drink for that Yankee team, as did Mike Brown with this team, because Tom Thibodeau brought out a toughness and a defensive mindset with the New York Knicks. But he also did not bring out the true best of this team when you consider he kind of was stubborn in his ways when it came to sticking with such a small rotation, going with 7 to 8 guys throughout the regular season into the postseason. And by the time he got to the conference finals, they were burnt out. And even if you did turn to someone else off the bench, they didn't have that burn. They didn't have that confidence, that belief in themselves. Whereas Mike Brown kept his bench involved all year. Maybe guys would go periods of time without playing, but he always kept everyone active, kept everyone involved. So if he did have to turn to them, they knew they were bringing in someone that could get the job done. Whether you want to talk about acquiring Alvarado midseason or Jordan Clarkson, there were spurts during the year where he wasn't playing, but then you turn to him off the bench, he'd come in, give you a quick 10 points and keep you in a game, such as he did in Game 3 against the Spurs, or Landry Shamet, or Deuce McBride before and after the injuries. This was more than just the 5-man starting lineup, and Mike Brown deserves a lot of credit for developing this bench. But if we're going to give credit, you got to give credit to those who aren't here anymore. There's always, when a team wins a championship, there is always people that helped you get to this place that didn't see the ultimate finish line, but you wouldn't be here without them. As we mentioned before, Tom Thibodeau. The Knicks were a total train wreck in 2020. No one really wanted this job, but he was the guy that viewed this as his dream job, as the opportunity he always sought after. And in 5 years as Knick head coach, he went to the postseason 4 times. He won 4 playoff series, got to the conference semifinals twice, got to the conference finals last year with the Pacers, then was fired 3 days after Game 6. But you can't understate the defense and the toughness he brought out of this team. And then there's players along the way that didn't get to see the ultimate finish line, but they were guys that wanted to be here. They were guys when at a time it wasn't cool being a New York Knick. They were the ones that ended up coming here. We think of that summer of 2019 when the Knicks got bypassed by all of those superstar players, and they essentially had to settle for Julius Randle on a 3-year contract. And he outperformed his contract so much that he got a second deal here. Now, in that second deal, he at times turned into a bit of a pain in the ass. I don't know whether that was due to some of the injuries he battled or jealousy toward Jalen Brunson or whatever it may have been. But he began, as far as players, the turnaround for the New York Knicks. He helped get this New York Knicks team to a place where people wanted to be here, where they looked like an attractive option, an attractive destination. And then 4 years later, Dante DiVincenzo would join the party. He would sign on for a 4-year deal, would only end up seeing 1 year of that deal, where after a year of playing with his college teammates Brunson and Hart, he was part of the package alongside Julius Randle that was eventually shipped to Minnesota to go get Karl-Anthony Towns. So he never got to have that experience of playing with all 3 of his college teammates, with Brunson, Hart, and Mikal Bridges all there together. But he was a guy that was a tough player for this team, a tenacious guy, put up some good playoff performances in that heartbreaking Game 7 loss to the Indiana Pacers in the 2023-2024 season. And then the cherry on top of that was R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley. Quickley, who was a popular player amongst fans here. IQ and R.J. Barrett, well, they never fully reached their true ceilings, never reached their true promise with this team. They would turn out to be key because it brought you OG Anunoby. And OG Anunoby, we're going to talk about forever Jalen Brunson being the MVP of this finals. But let's be fair here. Brunson won the MVP of the finals based on Game 5. Well, he wasn't horrible in this series. He had his moments. He had the game-winning plays in Games 1 and 2. It was OG Anunoby that was the consistent driving force in this series. Even when you had Brunson getting off the slow starts, getting beaten up and having non-flagrant fouls by Wembanyama not called that were beating up Brunson, and Towns fouling out in Game 5 and committing some stupid fouls. OG was the consistent driving force throughout this series. He was the one that even when Brunson did start get going, you'd have moments of quiet from Cat and Bridges. OG stepped up and said, I got you, bro. I'm going to be along for the ride with you. And he's going to have the two moments that you always think about when it comes to this series. The moment, of course, that no one's ever going to forget, when Brunson goes for the three-pointer at the end of Game 4, misses, and OG just comes flying in out of nowhere, tips it in to give the Knicks the lead and eventually win on a historic comeback from trailing by 29 in the third and 15 heading into the fourth. But think about what happened in the moments leading up to that. Have a minute and a half before that, Wembanyama misses 2 foul shots that kept it a 1-point lead. Then, even after the Spurs retook the lead and were looking like they were going to lock things up, I still don't know what the hell De'Aaron Fox was thinking. Rather than trying to dribble out the clock, he's trying to go for a layup, and OG comes down and blocks him to give the Knicks one more chance to set up his heroics. That final 20 seconds of that game, OG Anunoby, beyond just following Brunson's lead in that game, putting up 33 himself, OG Anunoby was the hero of that game and really saved the Knicks. You think about it, you lose that game after going up 2-0 in San Antonio. You come home and lose 2 games in a row, all the momentum's gone. You start having a lot of doubts, start having a lot of questions creep in. The fan base begins to panic. But when you have a historic game like that, a historic comeback during a postseason of historics, it just leads to what was a fate of come play. We know Game 3 was weird. Game 3, whatever you want to place the blame on, whether it be the president's attendance, whether it be the TSA check-in for the fans coming into the Garden and the guardrails that were around the building 3 miles out that kind of took away the charm and the fun experience that was Knicks playoff basketball. Just Game 3 will always be the weird one. But Game 4, you got back to feeling like normal basketball, and it felt like it was all starting to slip away. The Spurs, as they had all series long, got off to strong starts. Double-digit lead after the first quarter. Knick fans, whether it be Celebrity Row or the psychos that paid the insane ticket prices just to get into the building and experience that moment, were looking around wondering what the hell is happening. Instead, you get a moment that you'll never forget. Now, when you have a comeback like that, it does take help from the other team. It does take their stupidity, whether it be over-cockiness by Wembanyama early in the game when Mitchell Robinson commits a foul against him and he's screaming at him, I'm in your head. Or he's getting up from the ground when they're up by 29 saying, I'm in their head. The Spurs, they lost all form of maturity. Yeah, they made most of their three-point shots in the first quarter, but that's not the kind of team that they've been all year long. And you knew the law of averages was going to catch up to them at some point. In that third quarter, they went 8 consecutive possessions with a missed 3, and it allowed the Knicks to slowly start to creep back in, slowly start to get back in this game. Once it got to single digits in the fourth quarter, with what you've seen this Knicks team play out during this postseason, you had the feeling that they were going to pull off something special. The same with Saturday night. You're trailing by 16 in this game, but Brunson finally woke up and had that Jalen Brunson game you'd been waiting for all series long. Even despite the fact that the whistle wasn't going the Knicks' way, despite the fact that they were overly protective of Victor Wembanyama, and he should have gotten a flagrant one that would have banned him from playing in Game 6 had that been played on Tuesday night. The Knicks had a determination all series long and all playoffs long saying, this is our time. This is our moment. We are going to make this happen. And when they went on these runs, the opposition had no answer for them. They had no answer for fourth quarter Brunson. They had no answer for a team that no matter what was going on, no matter how unhealthy Mitchell Robinson's thumb was, and he's another guy that you're going to forget the moment, but his rebound on the missed foul shot late in the game on Saturday night that kept the Spurs from getting back in this, that kept the Spurs at bay, kept them from getting another opportunity, is what's going to be remembered, at least in my mind, from that Game 5 beyond Jalen Brunson's heroics that night. It's still unbelievable to think about that we're in this spot, we're in this moment, but this Knicks team, they truly earned it. 16-3 in the postseason, a run that very few teams in history have ever gone on. And you could say that they got all the breaks. You could say that certain things worked in their favor, including not having to face the Boston Celtics or the Detroit Pistons. Teams like the 76ers, the Cavaliers, and hell, even the Spurs may not want to give them any credit at all. And that's fine. They can act like whiny little bitches all the way till the cows come home. But the Knicks have no reason to apologize. There's no reason not to celebrate. There's no reason to feel bad for anything. You've waited so damn long, and you finally have your moment. It wasn't as easy as you hoped for compared to the way things turned out against Philly and Cleveland, with Towns' foul trouble and Bridges' poor performances in some of these games. It left you sweating things out, but that's where you give, once again, Mike Brown a lot of credit. Because even when those guys weren't available, he had other guys to step in and go along for the ride with Brunson, with OG Anunoby, with Hart, who you know, maybe he's not going to give you the most when it comes to points, but if you watch the game, you know that he's always going to have an impact. He's going to be that everywhere man that makes a play that doesn't show up on a box score, but makes a play that says, this is why you love that player, and this is why you love New York Knicks basketball.
I'll be back.
Now, believe it or not, there were some things going on in the sports world besides the NBA Finals. First off, congratulations to the Carolina Hurricanes last night, knocking off the Las Vegas Knights in 6 games to win their second Stanley Cup in franchise history. Some of those games were really fascinating to watch because you watch the first couple of games in that series. Each team had a 2-goal lead at one given point in the series, and still ended up losing the game. And you're watching some crazy comebacks here, games going to overtime, Carolina even making a goaltender change throughout the series, which is something that at times is unheard of, but still come away with the victory and hoisting up Lord Stanley Cup for the second time in their franchise history. Then we get to baseball. And let me be amongst the many Yankee fans that says this, and let me be clear, you know I don't like cursing on this podcast, but I think this is very much justified. Aroldis Chapman, go fuck yourself. Aroldis Chapman out here talking about the fact that since the Red Sox are bad, he's likely going to get traded at the trade deadline. And he mentions the other day, I guess on a podcast somewhere, saying that he would need an apology from Brian Cashman if he were to be traded to the New York Yankees and become a Yankee for the third time. Yeah, how about an apology from you toward the Yankees for quitting on us in 2022? I mean, it's bad enough you were trash at the end of that contract, but then you go get a tattoo right before the postseason that led to an infection. You were unavailable to pitch for the Yankees in the postseason, and then you just walk off and go home because they didn't put you on the playoff roster. And this guy is such a big baby, such a piece of garbage. Now, that's not to say Brian Cashman isn't a jackass in his own right, but Aroldis Chapman is much, much worse, and I never want to see him in Yankee pinstripes ever again. Hell, I don't even want to see him ever get invited for Old Timers Day. That's how much he makes me sick to my stomach. I saw the Oakland A's, or should I say Sacramento A's, I'm sorry. They played a couple of games in their AAA ballpark in Las Vegas this week as an early preview for when they moved to Las Vegas full time in 2028. They've won 2 out of 3 in both of their series against the Brewers and the Rockies. But the 2 games that they lost turned into football games. Last Monday, they lost 15-14 in 12 innings. There was a combined 34 hits, 11 home runs, and 8 overturned pitch challenges in that game. Kyle Harrison, who's been awesome for the Brewers all year, got lit up, had his ERA go up by a full run with his performance there. And then yesterday, they lose to the Rockies 23-9 in a game that saw the Rockies hit 6 home runs. 4 of the 5 pitchers for the A's give up at least 4 runs, and the game was played in 101-degree temperature yesterday afternoon. The ball is flying out of there. They're going to have to put up some kind of humidor out there to protect it from being home run derby like they do in Colorado. And speaking of the Milwaukee Brewers, how about Jacob Misiorowski on a Friday night? What a performance against the Philadelphia Phillies, who have started to show a little bit of life here since going to Don Mattingly as their manager. The Miz just looked at them like, oh, hell no, not tonight, not against me. This guy has been the most dominant pitcher in baseball over the last month and a half. He's got an ERA in his last 8 starts of .17. He tops that by going out on Friday night, holding the Phillies to 1 hit over a complete game in which he would face the minimum, didn't walk a batter, struck out 15, threw only 95 pitches and 74 for strikes. It's like, damn, I don't even think you could do that on MLB The Show, the video game. That is hellacious performance for a guy that, as of right now, got to be the front runner for National League Cy Young. Hell, I think you got to put him in the MVP conversation for the things he's doing. Leading MLB in ERA, whip, and strikeout, and he's thrown more pitches over 100 miles an hour than the rest of the starters in MLB combined. The only concern I have with this kid is him staying healthy over the long term. Because, well, he's a tall guy. He's not like the most bulky in the world. And maybe that will work out in his favor, being more lanky than he is bulk. But he's such a fun show to watch that you just hope he stays healthy. You hope that he doesn't go through some of the things that we've seen most recently Tarek Skubal come back from. And Skubal made his return on Saturday against the Guardians, was okay. Wasn't anything special, but also wasn't crap. Got no help from his offense whatsoever as they left 11 runners on base. And for the Tigers, it's really just about getting this guy healthy and prepared for the trade deadline, because they're absolute fools if they hold on to him past the trade deadline. They're 29-42. They've never gotten going this year. Hell, they were under 500 while he was on the IL and weren't getting going even before he got injured. They were 5 games back of the third wild card and since have fallen to 6 games back of the third wild card. They're 9 games back in the division. You would think now's the time to try to catch the Guardians, as they're going to be without Jose Ramirez now for a little while with a broken hammock bone. Lost a couple other players in their lineup on Saturday against the Tigers, but they still got good enough pitching where I think they're going to hold off the Detroit Tigers, and nothing has gone the Tigers' way so far this season if you've watched them. So I think the best course of action with Skubal being a free agent this coming offseason will be to trade to him before the August 3rd trade deadline. And that was things we missed during the NBA Finals. Hope you guys all enjoyed that. That was a bit of a mouthful by yours truly to get through in a brief period of time. But we're going to come back, finish things up with the New York Knicks, some more thoughts on them on this Championship Monday.
I'll be back.
Is there a more annoying story going on in the sports world right now than what's going on with Texas Tech quarterback Brandon Sorsby? Now it's going to turn into a legal battle that we're going to hear about for months, as this time a week ago, a judge granted Sorsby a temporary injunction that cleared the way for him to play for Texas Tech in 2026. And in case you've been hidden under a rock, Brandon Sorsby is the kid that, while he was backup QB on Indiana last year, he broke NCAA rules by betting over 1,000 times over the course of his college football career, including 40 times on the Indiana football team. He was initially going to be banned from playing at college football, going to be pushed out and heading for the supplemental draft in the NFL, but him and his lawyers found someone that would grant him a temporary injunction that would lead to a court case that probably wouldn't be held until next February. Now, with that temporary injunction, he still would have been forced to miss Texas Tech's first 2 games, but come on. This 2-game suspension was a joke, considering the first 2 games are against Abilene Christian, an FCS school, and Oregon State, who was 2-10 last year. And let's face it, we could all go probably out on the streets and find 10 guys to pair up with us and go beat Abilene Christian. Now you're seeing the rest of the Big Ten is pissed off. They had a meeting amongst their ADs over a conference call in the last couple days, and they're filing a lawsuit against both Texas Tech and the Northern District of Texas, seeking a declaration of judgment and injunctive relief that will allow the league to use its authority to punish Sorsby and push back on this ruling that the Texas Attorney General put in place last week, which warned them any sanctions by Big 12 would be unlawful and countered by legal action. I mean, this whole crap is going to go back and forth for months. It's going to be more obnoxious than years ago, what we had with Tom Brady and the deflating of footballs and how that went between the courts for over a year. On one end, Sorsby, yeah, he should be punished. But on the other end, all of these Big 12 programs and all these programs in college football all together, they got skeletons in their own closet that are hidden. So you may be worried when you go into court cases and see what starts get dug up on you. Now, before we move on, a little bit of advice for the San Antonio Spurs, because they made a whole bunch of mistakes throughout this series. And they're the first team in the play-by-play era to have a double-digit lead in the first quarter of all of the finals games. And they still lost 4 of the 5 games and lost the series. De'Aaron Fox was probably the biggest culprit of their collapses, and he was awful throughout this series, especially in games 1 and 5, and is going to have the play that lives in Spurs fans' infamy, denying them of winning their 6th championship when for no reason he's trying to drive to the rim in the final 15 seconds of game 4. It gets blocked by OG, and we know what happened from there. Hell, Mitch Johnson should have read the room more clearly and played Dylan Harper more. And he outperformed De'Aaron Fox in this series, and he's going to be, along with Stephon Castle, the guard pairing for that team over the next decade. De'Aaron Fox, I don't care what money he has coming to him, he's not the future there. Dylan Harper is. But that team needs to grow the hell up. That team needs to show some professional maturity, show some respect. Because we've seen before, when you don't respect the game, in whatever sport it may be, the sports gods are going to come back and get you. They're going to say, no. You're not going to pull this kind of BS. You're not going to show a lack of respect for the game like this. I'm not saying that everything needs to be a handshake line like you see at the end of playoff series in the NHL. But you at least go out there and dap it up and congratulate the opposing team. All of the young players on the Spurs, other than Luke Cornett, and I think De'Aaron Fox was out there, but the rest of those guys on that team walked off the court before even showing a modicum of respect toward the Knicks. And then you've got the whining and complaining by Wembanyama after the game, saying we dominated the majority of the series. Yeah, guess what? You sound like a jackass, just like Kenny Atkinson and James Harden and Joel Embiid all sounded like after their series losses to the Knicks. Take it like a man, move on, and grow the hell up. You know, maybe this attitude by Wembanyama, as much as I think the league has become too much of a we're best friends thing over the last couple of years, this is almost the wrong direction you want it to be heading toward. And maybe it's showing that he's not ready for the coronation that we were all ready to give him before this series. We've all looked at him as the future face of the league, the successor for LeBron James. But let's face it, he's struggled like any other superstar has struggled in their first finals appearance. Not everyone is going to be Michael Jordan. Down the stretch, he was exhausted in these games. He shot only 34% in the fourth quarter, was a minus 20 in the fourth quarter of these games. And he himself is going to have the moments that he's going to be thinking about for a long time when it comes to this series, including missing those 2 foul shots late in game 4. I don't know whether he's got to bulk up this offseason, put on some extra weight, but he was getting pushed around by Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson in this series, and he's going to have to clear up his dirty play. You're not going to be able to constantly get away with that, with how loud the outcries were during this postseason, whether it be what he did to Naz Reid, which I thought at the time was an accident, didn't make him look like a dirty player. But as the postseason went on, there was just too many of these moments where you look at this guy and you're like, someone's got to send a message to him. Someone's got to put him on his ass and show that this is unacceptable. The things he was doing to Brunson, it became more and more looking less like an accident and more intentional. You don't want to see that. You want to see guys play hard. You want to see guys show some grittiness. But you don't want to see dirty play. You don't want to see people getting hurt. And it's something he's going to have to think about, something the Spurs are going to think about. But the Knicks and their fans, they're not going to be thinking about it. All they're thinking about is this coming Thursday, the moment that y'all thought was never going to come or prayed would come, but were fearful of it never coming. Your championship parade. Would it have been ultimately sweet if the parade was later in the week and you had clinched this at Madison Square Garden tomorrow night? Yeah. But as a wise man once said, or should we say, as a wise man has been saying a lot recently, fuck around, find out. It was the best thing that you got this done in Game 5 on Saturday. It wasn't the prettiest game in the world. It was the lowest scoring game of the entire series. But in the end, Brunson got the job done and had some key contributions along the way. And it's a championship that's going to forever feel special, going to always feel important for this fan base, for this city, especially when you consider the divides when it comes to the other teams. Mets, Yankees, it's about, I would say, 60% Yankees, 30% Met fans, and then the other 10% are the frauds that decide to jump in along the way on whatever bandwagon. For Giants, Jets, probably 55% Giants, 35% Jets, and then the 10% frauds. Hockey, it's more of a somewhat evenly divided pie chart. And then you can't forget about some of the other outside the city teams that fans root for, especially in both the NFL and in Major League Baseball. But in this area, there's no doubt 95% of the region is New York Knicks fans. And whether you're someone that's old enough to remember the last championship or this is all brand new to you, savor it, enjoy it. If you have the opportunity to and are within the physical and financial means of doing so, get your way out to New York City and the Canyon of Heroes on Thursday morning and watch this parade, because you never know when it's going to happen. Again, hell, to this day, I still have regrets that I wasn't able to make it out to New York City for the Yankees 2009 championship parade. So enjoy this, Knicks fans. Celebrate this, because it does not come every day. You made it look easy with how you coasted through the postseason, but you never know when you're going to get that next championship. Hell, Met fans have been waiting since 1986. Jet fans have been waiting since 1969. And who knows, maybe one of them, they're the next champion to be crowned in New York sports. Maybe it's the Yankees. Maybe it's the Giants. Who knows? We don't know. It's been a while since we've gotten a New York sports champion. And for it to be the Knicks and ending their curse, now the question remains to be seen, what's the next curse to end in professional sports? But that's why we love the sports world, because we just never know. We tune in on a weekly and nightly basis, and we wait for something exciting, phenomenal to happen, and sometimes we get something even better than that. And it leads to the euphoria that every Knicks fan has today, as they've been celebrating since about 11 o'clock on Saturday night. A very long-awaited and well-deserved moment for that team and fan base. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, June 15th, 2026. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. Remember, folks, you get one life, so you might as well live it up to the fullest. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody. I have had enough of you. Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will you?
I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.